Okay, so I want to speak to you about the basis of psychology, or one of the most prolific thinkers in psychology. So let's start it like this so you get a grip of one of the most interesting parts of his theory. Whenever you're going to make a decision, have you ever had that argument inside your head where a part of you is saying, no, don't do this, it's a bad thing. The other part of you is saying, go ahead. I'll give you an example. For instance, the easiest example. Say there's something delicious in front of you that you want to eat that's really bad for your health, that's going to ruin your diet, that's going to make you feel bad the next word. But it's right in front of you and you want to eat it. So there's this part of you that goes, eat it, eat it, eat it, eat it. Don't forget about everything. Don't worry about anything. Eat this today. You don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. Now is all that matters. So eat this now. And it's constantly going in the back of your head, eat, 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 eat. Okay, so that's one part that's inside your brain. And there's the other part that's going, no, this is a really bad idea. You're going to hate yourself tomorrow. People will judge you. You're going to be overweight. You're not going to be healthy. You're going to feel like this. You're going to feel like that. And that's the other part. And these two parts of your personality, the part that tells you to eat, the part that tells you to follow your drive, that's the id. And it's sort of like a stupid part of the human being. It's this idiot that just wants. It's short term. It doesn't think of the long term. It doesn't think of the results of what could happen. It doesn't think of whether this is good or bad for you. It just thinks, I want this, eat this, do that, fight that person, have sex, food, survival. It only thinks of what it wants. The other side, and equally stupid to the id, and the opposite side of the spectrum, is the superego. And your superego is sort of like that part of you that's always scared, that contains all the no and all the shame and guilt that society would usually impose upon you, and the ones that you would internalize inside yourself. So it's the one that's constantly telling you, don't do this, it's a bad idea, be careful, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. These are the two sides, these are the two opposite extremes. In the middle is you. And this is, of course, we're speaking about Freud right now, and this is the ego. The ego is this little bit, so to him, you are kind of like a giant iceberg. If you've ever seen an iceberg in the ocean, go look it up. Basically, the tip of the iceberg only shows, which is just a small little mountain. That's you, that's the ego. The conscious part of you is this tip of the iceberg. It shows on top of the surface of the water. But for that little tip, there's a huge mountain underneath the water. That's your unconscious, that's your repressed memories, that's your fixations, that's all the issues that have happened to you growing up from the beginning till now that you keep internalized. They result in the part of your personality that's visible, but we don't see them. Okay? So, yes, we're speaking about Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, and in many ways, currently right now, so this is something very important for you to understand. If you go to a psychology department, it's extremely rare to take a course on Sigmund Freud unless it's a history of psychology class. Psychoanalysis and Freud, for the greater part, are not fully agreed upon, but I don't want to focus on what's bad in Freud's theories. I don't want to focus on what's wrong in Freud's theories. I want to focus on the parts of Freud's theories that really are still used in culture, still used in psychology, in sociology, in most social sciences, and in our pop culture and in when we speak about. So we need to understand the id, the ego, and the superego, the three dimensions of your personality. The two extremes, the id and the superego, and the balance in the middle, which is the ego. We need to understand the 5 stages of development, from the oral to the anal to the latent to everything all the way down. These 5 stages of development are part of how you grow up and what you focus on. They're not fully as important as Freud would like to make them, but they are important for you to understand because they are used in pop culture. So when somebody says you have a very oral personality, or even more commonly, we say you have an anal personality. That means you've gotten stuck, you're fixated on the oral stage or on the anal stage in your development. On the oral stage is all about pleasure. It's about sucking, it's about tasting, it's about feeling with your mouth. So if you're somebody who, for instance, can't stop smoking, if you're somebody who can't stop eating, needs to constantly speak, we would say you're orally fixated. It means you are stuck. You had something wrong happen at that point in your development, the oral stage, the earlier stages of your development, and you're fixated there. You keep going back to it. Anal retentive personalities are people who tend to be obsessive compulsive, what we call neat freaks, or they need everything to be specifically organized or in a specific part of way. That has to do with toilet training and how they were able or unable, or how they were trained in releasing waste and excrement from the body. So these are kind of parts of things. Freud would say if you get stuck at a different stage, that attributes to your personality. Whether we use this really heavily in psychology or we don't, to some extent we do, but very limited. But it is important to understand for pop culture, for references, for society, for social life. So the other things I really want you to focus and understand on. One of the most interesting things that we speak about when speaking about Freud is speaking about the unconscious. So if you've ever had days when you wake up and something happens and your mood switches, you go from a happy mood to a sad mood, and we ask you why, and you go, oh, I'm moody. I don't understand why. I don't know why. There's no reason why. I'm just moody. No, there is no such thing as just moody. There is a reason, a cause for that mood. And that reason is in the unconscious. And this is something from Freud that kind of spends through the rest of psychology and is very heavily agreed upon, which is the concept that all the decisions we take and we don't take do stem from the unconscious. So the unconscious is this pile of information that we don't deal with on every day, but everything that has happened to us is stored in our memory, is stored in our personality, all the events, all the words, all the coincidences, all the links. So when something happy happened and you were listening to a certain type of music, that link between those two, this all gets stored in the unconscious. So that's why, for instance, if you listen to certain music at the beach in the summertime and it's winter and you hear that music, suddenly you feel nostalgic, you want to go back to the beach. It's because in your unconscious, these are linked. So the concept of the conscious and the unconscious being the bigger part of what forms you as a human being, this maybe is one of the most important things I want you to focus on Freud. We spoke about fixation, getting stuck at a certain level. He speaks about defense mechanisms. Defense mechanisms are normal, healthy ways of dealing with things within ourselves that we don't like. So for instance, if you have a defense mechanism, if you don't like the way you look, your defense mechanism being that you would behave in a certain way or dress in a certain way always, or not dress in a certain way. These are defense mechanisms to deal with something that you don't like, something that you don't like about yourself. Projection is something else that we need to talk about. Projection is when you project your problems onto others. For instance, one of the most common examples given is usually heterosexual males. Males, when sitting down, if he is having homosexual thoughts or homosexual doubts and he doesn't want to deal with them, he tends to project it onto others. So usually when you see a male who is very heterosexual, tries to act very macho all the time, goes out of his way to act heterosexual, goes out of his way to attack and make fun of others for being homosexual or being feminine in those incorrect descriptions, not only are you dealing with someone who has very little cultural awareness, but you're also dealing with someone who's most likely battling their own bisexuality or homosexual feelings or tendencies. And since they can't deal with them, they project them onto the people they see. Okay, so that's another way. Repression is another thing that you need to understand. Repression is basically whenever we take things and we basically swallow them. We talk about swallowing our emotions, swallow the things that happens, we repress. This, of course, can backfire with time because you get all this repressed emotions, you get this explosion, this release when things come out. So these are kind of what I want you to focus on. When you're looking at Freud, focus on the conscious and the unconscious. That's the most important. The formation of the personality, the id, ego, and the superego. The defense mechanism, projection, regression, the 5 stages of development is somewhat important. Repression, fixation, these are all important. Problems with Freud. Freud's psychoanalysis is considered to be an overall encompassing theory. Freud attempted to explain everything in the human behavior using psychoanalysis. Didn't succeed very well. Freud's theory doesn't meet the metrics of scientific method, which means it can't really be tested. Freud's explanation was that psychoanalysis is its own test. The fact that it succeeds means it's right. But that's not scientifically true. We need to be able to do experiments to verify and test. So this is very lacking in Freudian analysis. His uses of hypnosis, free association, certain types of testing, these all create problems. Of course, his problems with male and female, this also creates a problem. The last thing I want you to know about and kind of focus on a little bit, also because it's mainly used in modern culture, especially in film and in media and communication, is what we call the Oedipal complex. So the Oedipal complex is this normal stage in human development where the little boy growing up in the house would develop a sexual fascination towards the mother, which they don't understand. It's unconscious. The id is just saying this is a source of pleasure, so it becomes a deviated source of pleasure, and the father becomes the competitor because he's the one who's actually filling that gap. So the child has this deep-rooted fascination or unconscious desire to kill the father and replace them and marry the mother. This is what happens in the Greek play Oedipus Rex, but indirectly. What we're talking about really is the stages of development, projection, and this kind of shifting of emotion from one thing to the other. The child is slowly developing through the sexual stages, so it's normal for them to develop sexual fascinations with the people that are around them, and there's nobody more around them than the male and the female. The fear of the father punishing them, the joy of being closer to the mother, this all creates that combination. You can watch a lot of videos on the Oedipal complex that explain it in detail with animations, and they're really great. But it's just important enough to understand where it comes in, and of course then the reply to that would be the Electra complex. But again, one of the maybe the biggest attacks to Freud is how he has a double standard when it comes to male and female psychology to such a large extent. He's very biased towards male psychology. There's a lot of attacks that can be rendered against Freud, but something that is important for you to understand at this stage is that he is at the heart of studying psychology, and whether his theories have been all proven wrong or slightly proven wrong or some parts remain true, you can't really get into psychology unless you understand the basis of Freud and psychoanalysis, so that you can see the other theories, how they reactionary towards him and towards proving parts and towards disproving parts and going in different directions.